racked by a sense of guilt and shame over what he'd just done. Fred was desperate. For a while, he drove around town, but eventually pulled into a parking lot out of concern that in his distracted state, he might end up getting into an accident. For he didn't know how long he sat quietly in his car, reliving what had happened, wishing he could wind back the hands of the clock. Eventually, he found himself praying, and that's when a light suddenly went on in his head. He would go to confession. He made his way to a church that he often passed on his drive to work. Finding a priest, Fred followed him into the confessional and on his knees tearfully unburdened himself as he spoke through the screen. 10 minutes later, he walked from the church to his car, feeling immense relief. God's love for him had not changed, and his sin was forgiven. As Jesus teaches and acts with authority in today's passage from Mark's Gospel, so Jesus did for Fred that day, the priest serving as his instrument. This the Lord has been doing through his body, the church, for 2,000 years, protecting us, his family, from evil, and making use of us to battle the powers of darkness. Why were the people who listened to Jesus on that Sabbath day in Capernaum's synagogue so astonished by his teaching? Mark does not tell us the content of the teaching of Jesus, just that his air of authority really struck the worshipers. Perhaps because they knew him, and they knew him to be a carpenter's son, nobody special. And so they wondered, how did someone like that acquire the knowledge and understanding of Scripture and God's ways as revealed in what he just spoke? Now, they might turn to him to make them a wheelbarrow, but trusting his guidance in matters of faith was a completely different story. That's not something that carpenters' sons do. At least that's what they thought. Yet, unlike the scribes, who, when speaking, always appealed to the words of some learned rabbi of long ago as verification of what they were saying, this man taught as though he were the mouthpiece of God himself. That's why they were struck. Of course, Jesus was his own authority, as the demon makes clear by naming him the Holy One of God. In Mark's Gospel, no human being recognizes Jesus' true identity until Jesus dies on the cross, at which point the centurion who bore witness to this recognizes that he was the Son of God. The demon possessing the man calls Jesus by his true name, not to honor him, but in an attempt to control him. Spirits, which as everyone in that day knew, were more powerful than human beings, could be friendly or they could be evil. And this patently was an unfriendly spirit, and it feared Jesus' power. The ancient world believed that the one way to defend oneself against a spirit was to know its name and call it by its name. This is what the demon is trying to do in revealing Jesus' identity. But Jesus is more than just a spirit, being God himself. And so the demon's tactic fails, and it is cast out. Though neither Jesus' disciples nor the crowd in today's passage knows that Jesus really is the Son of God and that his authoritative teaching derives from this, they do get quite a good clue because he works a miracle. Casting out a demon, or walking on water, or multiplying bread, or healing cripples, or granting sight to the blind, each miracle like this is a manifestation of God, revealing that God dwells among his people. When Jesus teaches, things happen, as revealed in today's reading. And this is what Fred found that day when in the sacrament of reconciliation, Jesus spoke. Jesus taught him about divine mercy and then acted powerfully, freeing him from his terrible burden. Because when Jesus speaks, things happen. In fact, it's because things happen when Jesus teaches us that we know his words are authoritative, not the words of an impostor. My friends, there are impostors galore in our world today, and there always have been, including in Jesus' time. They sell us false religion, tainted real estate, the politics of division and hate, and impossible get-rich schemes. Take Clark Stanley's snake oil liniment, for example. In the 1880s, Clark Stanley professed himself, styled himself, to be a cowboy who had lived among the Hopi Indians in Arizona and had learned about their wondrous snake oil medicine, having been given this information by a medicine man of that tribe. Now, Clark Stanley was a talented con man, and he sold this concoction for decades. Its labeling and an accompanying booklet lay out astounding claims for this product. It helped with rheumatism. If anybody here has ever had sciatica, try to find a bottle of this stuff. Not only was it good for that, it helped for something as common as a sprained ankle. It also was good for frostbite, so we should have had it a couple weeks ago, and for sore throats and headaches, even for animal and insect bites, and of course for snake bites too. It even was effective, Mr. Stanley claimed, in treating partial paralysis of the arms. See me after Mass if you have any of these issues. Again, this man was a talented imposter, so successful with his product that eventually he built plants to produce it in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Eventually, though, the feds caught up with him. In 1916, they thought maybe it's time to test this snake oil liniment, and in doing so, they discovered it contained mostly mineral oil, which has no effect on any of these issues that he names on the label. And so he was fined $20, which is about $443 today. This phony medicine and the con man who sold it, they have many imitators today, but none of them is capable of speaking or acting with authority. They're not like Jesus. Brothers and sisters, I hope that you and I and all who follow in the way of Christ always listen to Jesus and then speak and act for him, because this is what we have been baptized to do. We hear him speak and teach in Scripture and in the church's teachings. Empowered by the sacraments of Eucharist and reconciliation, as well as daily prayer, we then do as he did. In this, what inspiring examples people like Saint Teresa of Calcutta and Blessed Oscar Romero of San Salvador provide us as persons who were as far from con men as possible, but who so imbibed Jesus that they spoke and acted with his authority. Saint Teresa touched the whole world through her loving care of the poorest of the poor. Blessed Oscar encouraged the downtrodden of El Salvador who were being tortured, disappeared, and murdered by their government during civil war. He stood up to the government, which in 1980 had him murdered while celebrating Mass. On numerous occasions, I've preached about these two towering figures of our day, and how many more there are in the life of the church who similarly have spoken and acted with the authority of Jesus Christ. And my friends, we do too. I know parishioners here, some of them among us this morning, who manifest Jesus' power, as we see, for instance, in our ministry to the hungry and the homeless at the St. Elizabeth Center in Lorraine. May each of us who hear Jesus' words and experience his power put ourselves at his disposal so that he may reveal himself to others through our practice of mercy, generosity, kindness, and self-sacrifice.